What's happening, Bitcoin accumulation country? My name is Phil. This is the Fun with Bitcoin podcast. We are in season 3, and this is episode 16. Hope everybody's doing well out there. I've got a really interesting interview today with Mr. YanPritzker, and I think everybody's really going to enjoy it. I actually met him on Telegram, and we chatted back and forth, and anyways, we hit it off, and I figured, you know what, I absolutely had to have him on the show. So we're going to dive into that, but before we do, here is a little word from our sponsor, Swan Bitcoin. We are going to talk about dollar cost averaging and Swan Bitcoin. As you guys know, they're my first official sponsor, and I'm obviously really glad because they are Bitcoin only, and that's important to me. Very important, actually, probably the most important thing. But anyways, let's talk about dollar cost averaging, right? Because in the end, we don't all have the full amount of money that we are going to put into Bitcoin all in one shot. And what is, I believe, to be the safest and easiest way to get into Bitcoin is with dollar cost averaging. And Swan Bitcoin offers you 3 really easy things to remember, okay? You can automatically withdraw from your bank account, automatic purchase of BTC, and automatic withdrawal to your chosen address, okay? It's nice and simple. It's run by some good people, and I definitely suggest any Bitcoiners to go and take a look at Swan Bitcoin and see if their dollar cost averaging platform works for you. All right, guys? So check it out. The link will be in the show notes. And now, without further ado, on with the show. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me on another Fun with Bitcoin podcast. I've got a gentleman with me that I actually met, I think, on Telegram. I think that's where we started messaging each other. He is the co-founder and CTO of Swan Bitcoin, the maker of Give Bitcoin, the former CTO of Reverb, and also the author of Inventing Bitcoin. I'm talking about Mr. YanPritzker. Jan, thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I think we met in one of those taco pleb chats.
That's right.
Which I love so much. I'm mostly lurking there. Just so much going on in there. I just try to come in and like read and try to catch up on 1,000 messages. It's kind of absurd.
TCBP is awesome.
Yeah.
So look, as I told you, I don't know very much about you, with the exception of your involvement with Swan Bitcoin and our chats. So as customary on the Fun with Bitcoin podcast, I want to know your rabbit hole story, and what's the who's the thinker behind the thoughts? What's got you into Bitcoin?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have a very kind of weird path to Bitcoin, and I'm no different. I first heard about it in 2011, and it was on Slashdot, and I hadn't really researched what it was. I just kind of heard like, hey, there's some people, they're working on this open source thing. It's like a payment system or something. I wasn't really sure what it was. And then I saw it was for sale, and I was like, okay, I'm going to buy some just in case. So I actually ended up buying some on Mt. Gox at $30, which was amazing, cool. Right? And then, of course, the price just tanked. I just got destroyed, wrecked completely, went down to $2. And, again, I hadn't researched it, didn't know what it was or anything. So after I got totally wrecked on that, I just like sold whatever I had remaining and basically exited the markets at $2. So that was encounter number 1 with Bitcoin. Encounter number 2 was, so I'm a startup person. I've been doing startups like all my life. And I went to school for computer science and stuff, but I've been like tinkering with computers since a young age. So pretty much when I got to out of college, I started getting to startups, and I was doing one after the other, just like you name it. I was an early engineer. I was a co-founder. I was just working on a lot of different things. And in 2012, I got into this company called Reverb, which I helped start with David Kalt. And basically it was a musician's marketplace. So think of it like an Etsy, but for drums, guitars, effects. So we wanted to make a really nice place for musicians to shop for gear, for stores to sell the gear that they have, and for bands to offload their gear. So we started the site in 2012, and it was really, it was a big deal. Like it was just the two of us in 2012. By the time we got to like 2015, 2016, it was like 80 people. It was growing really fast. And essentially I didn't pay attention to Bitcoin. So I heard about it in 2013, but I was knee deep in building Reverb. So I pretty much ignored it. I heard about it. I looked at Coinbase at the time. Was they had a nice looking app, so I bought a little bit there at $1,000, and then saw it go down from 1,000 to like 300, and basically said, okay, I guess I'm just a fool again. They keep tricking me to buying the top and selling the bottom. And again, didn't know the first thing about Bitcoin trading, financial markets, nothing. I was the tech guy, and I heard about it as a tech idea, and I bought into it, and then basically just got wrecked. So focus on Reverb for the next couple of years. Then 2016 came around, and my cousin, who was working for Microsoft at the time, basically said, hey, like, we're looking at a lot of this blockchain stuff. You should look at this blockchain stuff. It's really interesting. I said, okay, what's this blockchain stuff? And then I started researching it, and I saw Ethereum and all this other stuff. And I realized, like, oh wait, this is like the whole Bitcoin thing that they were talking about. And then so I went back to Bitcoin and started researching Bitcoin kind of from the ground up, right? And trying to understand, what is Bitcoin? How does it relate to this whole like blockchain movement that all these like companies seem to be really interested in? And because I had a development background, I was very lured by the idea of this like decentralized, like you can build decentralized apps, which was like this really nice shiny marketing that Ethereum had at the time. And I asked a bunch of people at work, like, what do you guys know about blockchain? What do you heard about? Everybody's like, yeah, Ethereum's like a thing. You can build decentralized apps. It's super cool. So I spent like 6 months basically in that ecosystem studying Ethereum, studying all these other kind of like projects going on. And it was very interesting. But meanwhile, I started watching these Andreas Antonopoulos videos about Bitcoin. And like he was explaining, Bitcoin is not a technology, it's money. It's like freedom money, really important. And one of the coolest videos is this thing called Currency Wars, where he talks about how governments are shutting down, access to capital, talked about Greece and Cyprus and all this stuff. And a light bulb went off for me at that time around like, this is what it is. It's money. They're building money. Okay. This is not a payment system. This is not, decentralized applications. This is money. And it took me like probably a year of full-time study to finally come around to that idea, and reading a lot of people and listening to a lot of podcasts to finally get my head around this idea that Bitcoin is money. And then, of course, through a long evolution, probably over the next year or 2 years, I started to fall down the Bitcoin rabbit hole much more deeply. Started realizing that the rest of the stuff was, probably noise, if not outright scams in a lot of cases. Um, and essentially came out of Reverb in 2018, thinking like I had to work on Bitcoin. Like there's nothing more important in this world than working on freedom money. And so I left Reverb in 2018. We were 150 employees, doing about, I think we were close to 600 million in annual sales of music gear. So it was a big company. And, I wanted to do something new from scratch. I didn't know what it was. And I just, decided to go down and see what would come out from my Bitcoin journey. That's kind of what brought me here.
That is freaking amazing. I love the so you've got the tinkerer background, but you also said you have background as a dev, and I don't know if I missed it, but you do like you do programming like C or something like that.
No, not C.
No,
Although
okay.
that was one of the first things I learned when I was a kid. No, I mean, I basically kind of grew up doing web applications, and
Web
that's
apps.
the last 20 years I've been doing a variety of different web apps. I worked on like a prediction market, an online university, an airline reservation system, a social like invitation startup that was kind of my own thing. So a lot of startup, all kind of in that web app space. And I thought when I left Reverb that I would work on something in Bitcoin. I just didn't know what. So I decided to just kind of jump in with both feet and learn and see what the opportunities were. And I pretty quickly fell into a consulting gig with this company called Bloxroute, which is kind of, they're like this blockchain scalability layer. This was before I understood kind of the difference between, I guess, Bitcoin and blockchain, I would say.
Yep.
So I spent about a year helping them with infrastructure and learning all about every blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, you name it. Like we were looking at ways to move blocks around faster. And they have an interesting technology to do that. Of course, it requires centralization. It requires to pump those blocks through a central system that will route them. And when you have a central system, of course, you can do things much more efficiently. That's the whole point. When you have a decentralized system, it's highly inefficient. And this is the thing that it took me a while to understand. And it also took me a while to understand why Bitcoin wasn't going to go down that path. Because for Bitcoin, decentralization is the thing, right? It's like it's the thing that will be it will sacrifice everything for that, right? It's okay to be slow. It's okay to be, expensive, whatever. All the things are okay. What's not okay is for having somebody in charge of it. And that's the most important thing about, if we want to reinvent money, we want to have money that is not controllable by anybody. Otherwise, we've just got the same system that we have now. So that was the most important thing about Bitcoin. And coming out of Blockstrat, I really had a good appreciation of, first of all, what the actual scalability problem is, understood why none of these, jokers at BSV or Bcash were ever going to fix that problem, because you make the blocks too big and the blockchain won't come to sync, right? It's either going to be all hosted in one data center, or it's never going to sync.
So I kind of want to talk about that, because I think a lot of people miss the point about inherent latency. Okay, like, because there's inherent latency
Right.
around the world, and then essentially, if you make the data blocks too big, what you're going to have is just an entire. At least what I imagined was that eventually you get to a point where everything is just backlog and nothing ever really moves through, unless you have centralization.
Right.
Unless you have centralization, you really cannot do this, because
Right.
you can't afford to have that latency. So anyways, that was just...
Well, yeah, it's just like, you have to realize that Bitcoin nodes are all over the world, right? And we have some in China and we have some in the US, and like they're about as far apart geographically as you'll get. And, there's latency between them. There's a couple hundred milliseconds latency.
That's right.
And so what you're dealing with there is, if that connection is slower or severed in some fashion, like, you need to have your blocks travel all the way across the world, and for other miners to get them and to mine on top of them. If they don't mine on top of if the entire network doesn't agree what the latest block is, then you have multiple copies of the blockchain, and you can have orphans where, some blocks are considered valid on one chain but not on the other. And if your blocks get so big that they take longer to transmit than the next block comes, then the blockchain unravels, right? Because you have like a fork upon a fork upon a fork, and basically nobody can come to consensus what the chain is. And so, like, Bitcoin is structured in a way, it's very conservative. The blocks are like let's say they're closer to 2 megabytes now with SegWit, but they're still in the realm of, you can count them on one hand, the number of megabytes, right? And it could have been 2 megabytes, it could have been 4, it could have been 10, it probably still would have been okay. But the point is, it is what it is. It's like the number was relatively arbitrary chosen at the time, and it's a good number. So it's fine. It's going to be fine.
He knew something about networks.
He might have known a little something.
He knew something. Like, it wasn't. But yeah, I definitely agree.
But I'm saying, like, he could have made it 2 megabytes and it would have been still fine, right? The fact that he made it 1. The point is that, the point is that Bitcoin will never be big enough to settle every transaction on the planet in real time. That's just not, you can't have that happen on a decentralized system. And anybody who's trying to tell you otherwise, it's just basic networking and latency stuff. Like, that if every coffee transaction has to go to China in order to be confirmed, it's not going to happen. So, like, that's obvious from day one. So if you come at it from that perspective, then any number is fine. Is it 1 megabyte, 2 megabytes, 4 megabytes? They're all just in the same order of magnitude. You're not really solving scalability by changing that number. So that's why, things like the Lightning Network are much more important, or other second layer technologies.
No, I definitely agree. I totally. I always say that people underestimate what's really coming on that second layer, because if you understand, even just if you look at our current banking system and you take a look at MasterCard, Visa, that's a second or third layer technology on our banking system, and look at what they do.
It's at least a third layer, maybe more, because there's
I'm always trying
to. There's like the actual money, then there's like Swift, and there's like, God knows how many layers there are until you get to Visa.
I was trying to figure out, like, I'm like, all right, so what layer are they? But they're definitely a payment
5
layer.
or 6, I would think.
They're a payment layer. They're up there.
Right.
But it's interesting. I definitely think Lightning's going to. I think that we're going to see some interesting development with L2 as well. Have you ever spoken to, because you're talking about this stuff with latency and everything, and you got me thinking about this, one of these guys that I argued with on Bitcoin Twitter. He's a very educated gentleman from Cornell, I think. Is it? The Emin?
Emin
Gunter or something like that?
Emin Gunsir. Yeah. Gun's actually, so I met him in person. Gun's actually... Yeah, he's kind of like involved in Blockstrat. He's one of the co-founder, advisor type people. I met him in person. He's not as aggressive in person as he is on Twitter.
Okay, cool.
He's actually pretty cool in person. But all these guys, they're tech guys, okay, and I have nothing against them. I think they're smart guys. The people working on Blockstrat, like there's PhDs from Cornell and from Northwestern. Like they're smart dudes, and they're working on a tech solution to a problem that is a tech problem. However, you have to like step back and say, what is this? What a problem are we solving? Now, there might be a world where there's like a corporate, shared database, and we call that a blockchain. If you want to call that a blockchain, fine. 3 companies want to share a database, fine. Then it might make sense for them to have something like that to like make it faster, right? Because it's already centralized. Fine, I have nothing against that. That has nothing to do with with what Bitcoin is. I think the problem is when you start to conflate like these things, and I won't comment on what Goon is doing with his other projects. I have no idea with Avalanche or all that kind of stuff. I don't like anything that has a coin attached to it. I think that's a bad idea. You want to do networking research? Like, awesome. You want to do, research on fault tolerant algorithms? That's great. I think that research is wonderful, and it's been happening for decades without any coins involved. And when you try to sell something to the public with a promise that this thing is going to, go up in value because my algorithm is fancier than your algorithm, well, then you run into a totally different issue, which is you're not really talking about technology anymore. You're talking about money, and money behaves in a different way, and competition between monies behaves in a different way than it does between technologies. And I don't think that everybody agrees on this. I think a lot of people in the quote unquote blockchain and crypto space think that they're going to come up with a better coin than Bitcoin, and it's going to have better features and like it's going to win. But
they don't get.
I think they're not really understanding what we're competing on. I don't think they understand the vector on which Bitcoin competes with their coin, which is not faster, more private. Like none of that matters. It's that it's not under anybody's control.
Exactly. But I do want to go back and just say I do agree with you on all your points, about him and what he's doing and everything like that. My problem is once you start introducing the token, or you start to introduce the idea that you're making something that is going to be better, like you said, than Bitcoin, but really it's completely centralized and owned by somebody. So I don't see how, like, that's what I don't like. I just don't like the sleight of hand,
Yeah.
That's what gets me. And it's like, man, like you said, these are smart guys. So why are you, it's like, why are you trying to mess with people like that? Like that's just weak.
I don't have a good explanation for it, other than I think that a lot of smart people still kind of see this as a technology issue, and they think that it's just like the Facebook and MySpace thing. Like if only we came up with a better social network, everybody will just migrate there. And I think people think this about Bitcoin as well. But I really love like what Knut Svanholm, he has this new book called Sovereignty Through Mathematics, and he said the invention of Bitcoin was the invention of digital scarcity. You can't reproduce that because that in and of itself is the refutation of that it's scarce, right? So like these people are all trying to reproduce something that's supposed to be scarce, and they're coming up with all kinds of fancy technical ways to like remove themselves from the equation and say, okay, it's a fair launch, it's not a pre-mine, it's not this or that. They're trying to create all these ways to pretend that their coin isn't just another copy of Bitcoin with some kind of magic on top. And even if it's a totally different ground up rethink, it doesn't matter. I mean, the point is it doesn't matter. It still has a founder, still has a team, and it has all these things that are centralizing to it, and you're competing something that's had 10 years of quiet development, that's been able to develop under everybody's nose quietly without being seen. And now that any new coin comes to the market, everybody knows about it and day one. And it's not like you can't have this organic process repeated again. It's not going to happen. It was a historical accident, I consider it. And that the fact that it was able to flourish in the environment that it did, and now it's here. So like now you have to compete with it. So good luck.
Exactly. I totally agree. And I actually spoke with Knut. I spoke with him last week, and he obviously talked about his book Sovereignty Through Mathematics, and we talked about exactly that, the Immaculate Conception. And the fact that one of the reasons it's important is because it's kind of ingrained in the human psyche, this idea that something is kind of like born. If you think about it, right? Like, I don't know if you're a huge fan of the movie The Matrix, But you know,
Of
like
course.
obviously,
Grew up,
right?
grew
Aren't
up with
we
that,
all?
right?
So, but you never
Anybody
know.
in this age group?
But I can't assume. You know,
Yeah.
you may not. But like you know, the right the story about you know the man that was born, you know, like in the
Hmm.
system, right? You know,
Yep.
like that he could change anything and he could do anything he wanted, and it's this idea, right, of Immaculate Conception, that it's
Hmm.
like a thing that is born of the system, and that is exactly what Bitcoin is. It's like this answer, you know, to a
Yeah.
lot of
I mean,
questions
there's
and
so many
mistakes.
things that are special about Bitcoin that could have been different, right? Like even, you know, the timing of its birth, right? It was born during the financial crisis, 2008. The message embedded in the blockchain, like the chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Why is it that message and not something else? What would Bitcoin have been if it said something like, you know, free pizza for everybody? Like, you know, I don't know. I'm just making things up. But just think about it, like the religious undertones, the timing, like everything that comes with it is so kind of unique and special. And now if you try to reproduce it in that way, you're just looking like a cheap clone. So it's like it's a total accident of history. And maybe Satoshi was this, you know, brilliant genius. Maybe he was just a dude who got lucky and put together some pieces that were already floating around, and it was just there at the right place at the right time. We don't know. But in either case, it happened, right? And it happened in this very unique way that it's just impossible to reproduce. And I think people underestimate the importance of, you know, religion when it comes to money, because
Mm-hmm.
money is in a lot of ways a religion, right? You have to believe that it is backed by something, especially modern money.
Oh yeah.
You have to believe, and our faith is about to get tested, man. They're about to print a lot of this stuff. So, you know, it's like we are living in very interesting times where we get to see everything that Bitcoiners have been talking about for years. It's being played out in real time.
Oh
We
yeah.
told you the money printers were going to go crazy. They're going crazy. We told you they're going to try to take away all your rights. It's happening. Like all of these things are happening, right? And who knew that it was going to happen now? I mean, it could have not happened now, but now that it's
Yeah.
happening, Bitcoin is here. We've got to see what's going to happen. I think it's very interesting to watch how it plays out.
I totally agree. It's
Like,
kind of it's kind of scary but exciting at the same time, right? You know,
yeah, I mean,
because
I mean, I'm sure. I mean, look, it's a tragedy. People are losing their jobs, and the markets are tanked, and like people are losing their retirements. It's a very bad situation. But the thing is, what got us here, right? Like, why are we here? It's not
right.
coronavirus. That's not why this is happening. It could have been anything that triggered this. We have been, you know, on a massive pump for 10 years, loose monetary policy, and everything that people have been telling, or at least people in Bitcoin and Austrian economics have been saying, like if you listen to them, they were warning about this for a long time, and they were saying, hey, this is not sustainable. Meanwhile, we got the president going on around screaming that the stocks are all-time highs and everybody should be buying. And it's like anybody with elementary, you know, basic understanding of markets knows that when somebody's yelling all-time high, buy the all-time high, that's like don't do that.
That's the
And,
signal.
that's the signal,
That's
man. That's
like
literally called the top. um,
I mean,
like within a month, right?
he
So
did.
like, yeah, he did. And so that's the thing that we have to understand is we're here because we allowed loose monetary policy to create this world. And Corona or Schmarona, it could have been anything that popped this bubble. Now we're experiencing the pop, and the pop is very painful, but it's also a very good lesson to understand why we got here and hopefully not repeat those mistakes, even though they're being repeated tenfold right now. And I'm literally scared for what the next 10 to 20 years are going to look like on the policies we're setting up today. It's absolutely absurd what's going to happen.
It's it's really scary stuff, and as we know, it's very easy to take things away. It's very difficult to put them back in place.
Absolutely right.
So, you know, like right now we're definitely seeing some change in behavior, you know, some forced change in behavior because of what's going on with coronavirus. I actually wanted to talk about that too because, you know, a lot of people, right? You have a lot of people sitting there saying, look at what it did, you know, like coronavirus is ruining our livelihoods, you know, it's ruining our, you know, it's ruining the markets, it's ruining this. So, unfortunately, the other side of that coin is that no, it's not ruining, it's exposing.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunately exposing the fragility of our hospital system, which shouldn't be this fragile. It's
Yes.
exposing the fragility of our financial system, which shouldn't be this fragile. So it's like, you know what? It's the double edged sword, right?
Yeah. I agree with that. And I
You know.
think, you know, reading, like I've been reading Anti-Fragile recently, Nassim Taleb. Shout out to Nassim Taleb.
Love that
um,
book. Love that dude.
yeah, great book. You know, the concept is very simple. Like if you don't have something that tests your fragility all the time and forces you to become anti-fragile, then you build a fragile system. Like you build a system that is has no stress in it, and that's what the Fed has done for us, right? They eliminate stress. So anytime there's stress, they come in and they say, oh, no problem, here's a little bit of extra liquidity, let's just fix all the things. You want some money? We got money for you. How much would you like? 2 trillion, 4 trillion, 10 trillion? You name the number, we'll give it to you, right? And what is that doing? Well, that's telling people, okay, if you take risks that you shouldn't be taking, no problem, you'll get a bailout. You're not going to go broke. I mean, airlines aren't going to go broke. Banks aren't going to go broke. We're going to bail all of these systems out. We can't afford not to as a society, right? We have this classic phrase, too big to fail, that we learned in 2008.
That's right.
And now everything is too big to fail. Everything is 10 times bigger than it was in 2008. Yeah. So everything's getting bailed out. So it's like we're not allowing the anti-fragility to build. We're not allowing the immune system to develop because we're not allowing for small shocks to help us learn. We're fixing the small shocks and until the big one comes, right? We suppress volatility until the volatility blows up, and then goodbye. everything is going down hard.
So are we too big to bail yet? Right?
See, I don't know what that means because they can literally print an infinite amount of money, and that's what's going to happen.
But
they've announced that. Right?
But that's the thing, right? Like, so when are we too big to bail? When can't we anymore? We don't know what that number is.
We don't know what that number is.
We'll only know once it happens.
Right. I think it's also really interesting to say, like,
scary shit.
Why did they decide that 2 trillion or 4 trillion is the right number? Like, where do these numbers come from? They're completely arbitrary. Nobody actually knows. So they're going to put in the 1 trillion a day of repos. They're going to put a $4 trillion fiscal stimulus bill. Then nothing's going to happen, and they're going to go, oh, I guess that wasn't enough. Let's put in 10 trillion, and like it's just going to keep happening, right? Until I think they're probably going to reinflate this bubble at some point, and then what? What does the next crash look like 10, 20 years from now? What does that cycle look like after we've reinflated this bubble with 20 trillion in stimulus? Like, Jesus Christ.
Did you see today? I mean, like, look, all the news, all the money that's coming, right? They're gonna and yep. The market. I don't know what the market actually closed at today, but
I don't think things were down in general. It was not up as far as I know.
I don't think it was up. So I mean that tells you that the public doesn't care. At this point, like, it's like, look, we're down 582 points. We're down 18. Okay, so Dow is 18.5K.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
I don't think we're done either. I mean, I've been listening to a lot of Macro Voices, which shout out to Eric Townsend. Great show. And they've been talking about the virus since January and really calling how the magnitude of this, which a lot of us didn't really fathom. Even I, having listened to them and been like, yeah, totally, this is going to be really bad, did not fathom how bad it was going to be. And so, they've been talking about it like it's going to last until May or June, until the virus peaks. And I'm kind of with them. I mean, the hospital systems are only just starting to get overwhelmed. Like, these are things that are, when it happens in your neighborhood and when your local hospital's overwhelmed, that's like, then it becomes real. Then the panic sets in. And so I don't think we're done with this whole thing at all.
Totally agreed.
After it clears out, then what happened to all that money that was pumped in? What happens when we all come back to work and start to restart the economy? But now there's, our money supply is 4 times as big as it was before, or 10 times as big. I don't know how much bigger it's going to be. It was 4 times as big in 2008. That's what they did in 2008. What are they going to do this time? 10 times, 20 times? I don't know. And then what happens to the currency? It's, I mean, I don't understand how to even talk about this.
I mean, at some point, they're just going to start paying you to go to work. So it's just like, so you get a check and then you get another check because you get this other check. So
I frankly, like, somebody has to explain to me how this is supposed to work, because they're going to give free money to people. Fine. But then the goods, services, economy, there are not more of them. There's less of them. The whole thing's been shut down. So if anything, there's less production with more money supply. I mean, to me, like Econ 101, supply and demand, you're going to have massive inflation from this. And nobody knows where that, I mean, maybe there's smart people sitting and doing the math on this. I don't think they know how to model the system. I think this is it's a way too complex of a system. And the basics are too much money, too little production. That's not a good situation. And so, but at the same time, they can't sit there on their hands either, right? Because if the Fed's like, okay, the whole economy is crashing and burning, the Fed is expected to act. This is what we expect of the Fed. They're supposed to rescue us when we fuck things up. So, right?
But what can they do, right? They have no more, like, as you know, they have nothing left in the bag. I mean, like, like I'm saying, right? So what are they going to do?
Well, they're going to start buying stocks.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like they're pretty much
step.
They're going to start buying stocks. What are they going to do? Are they going to come shopping at our businesses and they're going to start to become our customers? So now all of a sudden, the Fed comes and buys your paintings from you.
I guess I don't know. It has to be.
I might be mistaken, but I think there's a country that does that. Where they support the artists and stuff like that, and they like the government actually buys
the government does.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Don't quote me on it. I could be totally making this up.
It could be a thing.
It could be a thing, but I don't know. I just, to your point.
I mean, I know that in Japan they've been like the Fed of the the central bank of Japan has been buying corporate bonds for a long time, for like 20 years, I guess, something like that. I mean, at least 10 or 20 years. Don't quote me on that, but we would not be the first country to start doing what we're about to do, which is buy corporate bonds. But then I don't know if anybody's actually out there buying stocks. Maybe Bank of Japan is doing that as well. I'm not sure. But at the point where the central bank is buying stocks, bonds, everything in the economy, all prices are distorted. There's no more price signaling. That's the problem. Like, this is why we never learn our lesson, because if number go up all the time, okay, I'm going to buy more stocks because like the number only goes up, right? There's no volatility and the number only goes up. It seems like a great story for me. And then like another black swan event comes and everything, goes down by 50%. So I don't like it. And I don't see any clear way out of it either. That's why we have Bitcoin.
That's right.
I guess coming back to that.
That's right. Turn our attention back to Bitcoin. No, man, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love to go off on tangents like that.
No, I like that too. I mean, I've been learning so much about macro. I don't want to sound like a fool. Like, I probably am very sophomoric about this now because I think I understand how everything works now, even though I've probably just scratched the surface. After listening to like macro voices for, in a 6 months straight. Now I'm some kind of macro genius, but obviously I don't know anything that I'm talking about. So don't quote me on any of this stuff. I know about Bitcoin. I know about tech. And I'm starting to understand how the economy works. But I'm starting to understand that nobody understands how the economy works. And I think, the more important thing is to know that it's too complex of a system for anybody to model, and just stop thinking that you're going to fix it with some crazy interventions.
The experts aren't even experts. You know what I mean? So very true. I definitely, I totally agree. So turning our attention though back to Bitcoin, I want to talk about actually Swan Bitcoin, who I'm actually going to be talking about on my podcast.
Awesome.
I'm going to be at the beginning of each podcast. I'm going to start to talk about it and start to explain to everybody, about the dollar cost average model and why they should use it. So, take me back to the beginning. Tell me about look, you started this with Corey. I spoke to Corey on the podcast. Like, tell me your side. Tell me your story.
Yeah, Corey's awesome. So as I mentioned, I was consulting for a while. I was helping a bunch of different startups out. And one of those startups was actually Give Bitcoin, which was Corey's initial idea before Swan. And I was an early advisor to Give Bitcoin pretty much from the time it started. I helped them out with some of the content and kind of editing some of the book content that they're doing, as well as helping a little bit on the tech side. And Corey and I had been co-advisors to another company, a public company called Riot, which is a Bitcoin mining company. So we kind of had a lot of chances to hang out together and talk. And we'd just been both thinking about the same thing, essentially. Like, he started Give Bitcoin because he saw there was nobody in the gifting space really, owning that process. And he didn't think that there was really enough room to compete with something like Coinbase. Meanwhile, I had been developing this thesis around that on-ramps are the thing to be working on. Like, really, if you look at businesses in the Bitcoin space, there's a lot of stuff that's exciting, but maybe a little too early. And to me, that's including like pretty much everything with Lightning. Like, Lightning is awesome, really interesting, but nobody has Bitcoin in their pocket, let alone Bitcoins on Lightning. So my hat's off to the people working on that stuff, but it's just like, it's too early to make a serious dent. It's a long-term investment, right? Yeah. So if you want to work on a startup, okay, is it going to be Lightning oriented, app layer stuff? Is it going to be like in the infrastructure, like the lending, let's say? Lending's another business, which is interesting. But again, if nobody has any Bitcoin, then what are you lending? So to me, on-ramps were that thing that was in the sweet spot. We always need to on-ramp more people to Bitcoin. And as I was, in my journey over the last 2 years, as I was becoming more of a quote unquote Bitcoin maximalist or Bitcoin ultra, whatever you want to call it, somebody who understood the value of Bitcoin and wanted to work only on Bitcoin, I was onboarding my friends, right? And actually in 2016, when I onboarded some of my friends, I had them download multi-coin wallets. I had them use Shapeshift. Like I explained to them, at that time I was like, here, you can like swap in between Bitcoin and all these other shit coins and you can invest and whatever. But over time, as I got more educated on the monetary side and the more economic side, I started to realize that all these things had like zero fundamental value. And I was probably getting people wrecked by recommending them to do this. So I started moving away from that and basically saying, okay, Bitcoin is the only thing that matters. How can we make it easy to onboard people to Bitcoin? And that's when Corey and I were really just kicking this back and forth and said, we need a Bitcoin only on ramp that's going to couple this kind of educational flavor that Give Bitcoin had, which is, we had a book written in progress. We have a chapter for every kind of like, uh, why is Bitcoin important? What is money all about? Like all these things that educated you about the fundamentals of Bitcoin. So we had this idea of how do we combine the fundamentals and the learning experience with on-ramping in a way that's super simple. And so Corey came up with the Swan brand. He called me one night and he said, I got it. It's going to be Swan. It's Black Swan. And I said, it's beautiful, man. It's amazing. It's perfect. Not only is it a black swan because Bitcoin is, this positive black swan disruption to the whole, financial ecosystem, but it's also potentially like the story of the ugly duckling and turning into this beautiful white swan that's, something that's going to be beautiful for the world, a force of good. I always believed in Bitcoin as a force of good. That's why I started working on it. So when we had this discussion and the idea for on-ramps, we really just decided, okay, we need to make it so simple for people to dollar cost average. People need to not think about Bitcoin. They're saving a little bit of Bitcoin at a time. They're building up their freedom stash. That money's good for if they need to leave the country, they need to fight inflation, whatever the use case may be. They have money that is truly theirs and theirs alone. And the best way to do that is to put a little bit away at a time, savings, which is a lost concept on the American public. Like nobody saves anymore, right? Throw it in the stonks or spend it, right? Those are your two choices with an inflationary money. So we don't want that. We want saving, and that's why the Swan is all about saving a little bit of Bitcoin. Buy a little bit every week, every month, every paycheck. We make it easy. It's a no-brainer. You connect your bank account, and everything else just happens.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, part of the service is that you can choose, let's say, a specified amount before it automatically gets sent out to your Bitcoin wallet or something like that.
Yeah, so we're going to have auto withdrawals, and we're still working on those. So we have a hold for ACH fraud. So meaning when you deposit into from your bank into Swan, there's a certain hold period, which is 15 days for us to buy the Bitcoin, and then 60 days until you can withdraw it. Just because otherwise you can withdraw your Bitcoin and then call the bank and say that you never gave us money.
Oh yeah, of course.
And then we're totally screwed.
No, of course.
We don't want. But after that period, we can start to auto withdraw into your wallet. And the reason, what we're going to do is we're going to set thresholds, and that's for two reasons. One is if you withdraw very small amounts, then you end up with what's called dust. Some listeners may be familiar, but if you have essentially bits of Bitcoin or UTXOs that are really, really small, then at some point, if the Bitcoin fees go up a lot, then it could be too expensive for you to spend them. So if you were withdrawing like $1 at a time, probably not a good idea. However, if you put a threshold on there, let's say your threshold's, $100 worth of Bitcoin or like 0.1 Bitcoin or 100 million sats or, 0.01 Bitcoin, whatever it may be, take that, threshold and withdraw to your wallet periodically as soon as it hits. That way you have decent sized chunks that are not going to have fee problems in the future, or at least the fee problems will be diminished. And the other nice thing about that is kind of built-in privacy, because the amount isn't like so specific that you can go and say, okay, that's the amount that was purchased here, and that's when it went to your wallet. If the amounts are constantly like 0.01 BTC, 0.01 BTC, then it's kind of almost like default. It's almost like CoinJoin type of privacy, because you can't see individual amounts. They're all the same. But those are just some basic hygiene things we're doing for our users to help them stack in the right way, so to speak.
Very cool. Very cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's actually one of the features that got me. I signed up for the beta.
Nice.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, we're starting to roll people into the beta, and we're actually going to be live on March 25th. We're working like around the clock to make sure that everything is solid and workable, and getting people in. We have a bunch of people on our mailing list that we're going to start like rolling in early batches. So some people will get access a little bit earlier. Starting on March 25th, we're going to roll in some of the earliest signups, and then we're going to kind of be rolling throughout that week. and then the following week we're going to be just totally open.
Very cool, very cool. And I just realized this podcast is actually probably only going to come out in like 3 weeks from now.
Oh,
So
well,
I'll be
if you're
doing these
listening.
I'll be doing these Swan Bitcoin I'll be doing these Swan Bitcoin pitches at the beginning before
Yeah,
that. So.
it's all good. If you're listening now, you just
Sorry.
missed your chance to be an early beta person on Swan, but sorry about that. But now you can go to the site and check it out. So go
Exactly.
swanbitcoin.com.
That's awesome. Okay, so any other I was gonna say, do you have any other plans? Like what's I guess like what's in the future for Swan Bitcoin? Like right now you're doing the DCA. Do you guys are you just 100% focused on that, or are you gonna
we will
try to do
enable
anything else?
So we're gonna do one-time buys as well. I think we've had a couple different we had some feedback from early users. Some people love to start their stack off with a large amount, right? So even if you're going to be saying, saving $100 a month, maybe you want to put in $1,000, like you get your Minuchin bucks, you want to put those in. Great. So we're going to look at doing a one-time like initial stack boost, so you can start your stack off with a larger amount and then come in with smaller recurring buys. And we're also going to look into doing wire transfer so that you can actually buy more immediately. Because right now with ACH, like I said, there is that 15-day waiting period. With wires, it would be pretty much that same day or the following day. So we'd be, just like any other exchange, you'd be able to keep a US dollar balance with us. And it's not actually stored with us. We have a custodian licensed and regulated, handling all this stuff. So you don't have to worry too much. Obviously, you should always worry about custodians, not your keys, not your coins. But within that space, there will be a lot of people who just want to keep it in custody, and there will be some people who will keep small amounts in custody and withdraw periodically, which is fine as well. But yeah, we'll support wires, and we have some other really kind of more fringe and out there features that we're thinking about, maybe I won't talk about them just yet, but basically being able to buy Bitcoin when certain things happen, which will be very cool and kind of trigger buys on demand. So all those things are hinging on wires being activated. So we're probably going to do that in the next month and then follow up with some more exciting features.
So the banking system is always cumbersome. I've noticed. Like
it's horrible
because even from Coinbase, from Gemini. I mean, man, Gemini does something very similar. You know what I mean? Like they, you can go and buy Bitcoin instantaneously, but then you have to leave it on the platform for at least 7 business days.
Yeah.
You
and
know
so
what I mean?
they're
So
doing,
that's also a form of ACH. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the thing with the actual ACH window is 60 days. So literally you can call your bank up apparently 60 days after you gave somebody money and say that you didn't, which is really ridiculous. The finality of ACH is truly horrible. Somebody complains about Bitcoin having to wait for an hour for finality or for near, obviously there's no finality in Bitcoin, but after an hour on Bitcoin, it's like, it's as good as, it's as good as done. With ACH, it's literally 60 days. So it's completely absurd. So what that means is that if some company is letting you withdraw with before 60 days, that they're taking a lot of risk. Now, if they're a multi-billion-dollar company, maybe they're okay taking that risk. I don't like that risk. I mean, that's risk to the company that, that could be the company going out of business, right? Like somebody goes in and sets up 1,000 accounts and, does $10,000 deposits on all of them and pretends like they never happened. That's big. That's a big problem. So that's not the kind of attack we want to be open to. And so we're being really, really conservative with the way we're dealing with fraud, and which is we're not allowing you to do any fraud. Sorry, no fraud on this platform. And the simplest way to deal with fraud is wait 60 days and you get your Bitcoin after that, because for sure you're not going to get your money back. But as we get more sophisticated with that, maybe we'll lower some of those limits, especially if you're doing smaller buys or something like that. We're always looking at ways that we can improve that for our users. But the most important thing is to be around as a company and not to go out of business because a whole bunch of people decide to be assholes and try to claw back their money 60 days later. We don't want that.
No, exactly. Right. You got to definitely, you got to give yourself a chance to grow and, spin up. So that definitely.
Yeah. But everything we do is in the name of transparency. So like if anybody has questions, we're always out there. We're on Twitter. We have a text number that you can text and questions and we'll answer them. So these things are, both Corey and I have reputations. We have been in the space for a while, and I think it's important that people who believe in Bitcoin create Bitcoin only businesses and support them. Because I don't want to be explaining Litecoin and Ethereum to my parents when I say, go and buy Bitcoin in this platform. They go and open it up and it's like 30 coins. It's like, no, I don't want that. That's horrible. and it's not a service to your friends and family when you send them places like that. So let's start sending people to Bitcoin only businesses. I think it's super important.
Hats off to being responsible.
Yes, responsibility. And it's easier on you. If I send somebody to a Bitcoin only business, that's why I don't send people to Coinbase anymore.
Yep.
Because that's just it's too much for me. I don't want to answer their questions all day long. Like, it's really hard to convince somebody in a 15-minute conversation that like altcoins don't have value.
Oh my God.
Really, really hard. It took me like a year of studying monetary theory to understand that. I'm not going to be able to explain that in 15 minutes. So
no, of course not. And you can't just flash all your memes in front of them.
Right.
You know, like
we forget sometimes, being in the space for a long time, like that this is knowledge that we learn through osmosis from like hours of study per day. Normal people and everyday people don't have time for that. They really don't. They don't do their own research, despite that we always want to say do your own research. Nobody does their own research. They just ask a trusted friend.
Yes.
And so that's what it is. And so our mission is to make all the trusted friends recommend Swan, so that they don't have to answer their questions for their friends and family. They just say, go to this screen, fill out how much money you want to save per week, connect your bank account, call it a day. And then Swan will teach you about wallets, how to set up a wallet, how to withdraw, how to do all that stuff. Like, we will take care of that. I think that's what onboarding means. It doesn't mean throw people into a trading interface and say, good luck. Here's 12 coins you should be trading. Please enjoy, and hopefully you don't get wrecked. And if you do, no problem, just replenish your account. Come on, that's Coinbase's strategy, right? I mean, they want you to trade a whole lot of shit coins.
Oh, and, yes.
We can't have that. That's just not responsible.
And they want you to lose a lot.
Yeah.
So because you're going to keep paying in commissions.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, though. I definitely I really like that approach, and I think it really helps because one of the most difficult things, as you just mentioned, is onboarding people, not just because the altcoin proposition. Like even myself, right? Like when I first started, I definitely fell for altcoins.
I think most people do. I think there's very few, quote unquote purists. I think VJ Boyapati once said, like, I'm one of the few people who can claim that they've never touched a shitcoin. But
yep.
Man, I don't know. I honestly think that people who have touched shitcoins are become some of the best Bitcoin maximalists, because they've been there and they've been through it, and they've actually like looked at all these things and said, oh my God, like, I now understand what the point of this was, how it was marketed, and what it actually is.
Yes, it's true. And it actually makes you a pretty like a pretty bitter shitcoin denier, because it totally, like, you just get pissed off, and it's like, no, you don't know what you're thinking. People are sitting there and they're trying to convince you. And
I don't want other people to go through what I went through.
Exactly.
It was not like, it was a waste of time,
time and money.
Life. But the other thing is that you have to realize that when you talk to normal, everyday people, like, most of them don't know that anything outside of Bitcoin exists. That's the only, cryptocurrency they've ever heard of. They don't know about Ethereum. They definitely don't know about Bitcoin Cash or any other, shitcoin like Bitcoin fork clones. They don't know any of this stuff. And if anything, they might have known it for 5 minutes during like the 2017 hype bubble when it was in all the media, but everybody's forgotten about it. So it's almost like with us living on Twitter and all these different online forums, we're overexposed to a bubble like mentality around like crypto, which doesn't really exist. Like, most normal people don't know this stuff exists, and that's good. That means we have a chance to explain Bitcoin to them in a rational way and not even talk about the other stuff. This is why we don't have a section on our site calling, called like, what about altcoins? We're not going to talk about altcoins. Altcoins don't exist. Altcoins, they're low liquidity, trading tricks for people to acquire more Bitcoin. We're not going to talk about them on our platform and distract people, because most people don't need that distraction. They don't know about the stuff. They don't need to be introduced to it. So we have to be careful about how to talk to mainstream versus what's happening online, because people online might still be debating whether Bcash it should exist or not, but like, normies don't care. It doesn't exist for them, so no point in debating anymore. It just doesn't exist.
We know it shouldn't exist. No, I'm kidding. But I'm not.
I'm just saying, like, these debates are pointless because it doesn't exist. For all practical purposes, it doesn't exist. So
it's true.
You're absolutely right, because anytime my father talks to me about it, he doesn't come up to me and talk to me about the Ethereum,
Right, exactly. Exactly. He's just asking, like, should he or should he not buy Bitcoin and when,
That's
right?
right.
That's pretty much what people ask.
That's exactly.
Should I buy Bitcoin now? It's on sale. That's what I heard this week. A lot of my friends said that.
Oh, yeah.
Different conversation, by the way. Different conversation from the previous time when it went down to $3,000 and it really was on sale. And nobody batted an eyelid when it dropped from 12 to 3.5. And I was buying, and everybody else was like, a zombie. Now, what's different now? The whole economy is burning all around us, and people are like trying to buy Bitcoin. It's just very interesting, I think.
So, it's like I forget who said it, but lots of people say it all the time. But it's like when you need to get it, you get it.
Yeah.
It's like when you're ready.
What it is.
When you're ready, it's it's what's that saying? The lips of wisdom are closed except if you have the ears to hear it, or something like that. Fancy. Yeah, some kind of deep stuff.
Very deep.
It's kind of deep stuff about not being able to hear something until you're ready.
I think that's about right. And I do think there's a need-based component here. I mean, obviously, look, my friends, they're relatively well off. We're all like, Chicago, like North Shore, whatever. We are upper middle class. We're not going to bullshit ourselves. And for us, Bitcoin is not a quote unquote need. I buy Bitcoin because, first of all, because I think it's a nice way to diversify away from the crazy shit that's going on around us. Also, because I came from the former Soviet Union and I left that country without our money. We were able to keep $100 per person. My family, I was only 7 years old, but the government let us keep $100 worth of currency because capital controls. So I know what that's like, and I know that I want to have an option to leave if I want to, and I need to have money that's free. So, and a lot of my friends are in the same boat. They understand at least that story. They came from the same place. But we buy Bitcoin mostly as a luxury good. If you look at places like Venezuela or, the surrounding countries, they started buying Bitcoin. Like when Venezuela started hyperinflating and collapsing, all the surrounding countries started buying Bitcoin. Why? Because now it's real. They see that this shit is really hitting the fan, and Venezuela is really fucked, and that they could be next.
That's right.
I think that's what people are waking up to right now as well in America. They're like, oh, we thought stonks were going to go to the moon forever. It turns out there's something wrong with our economy. We didn't really understand what. They still don't understand what.
Nope.
But most people have a sense that something is not right. They don't know how to put their finger on it. But they've heard of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin exists outside of that bubble. So it's something they should buy probably just in case, because just in case they don't understand what's happening inside the bubble, it's better to have something that you can tether to outside of the bubble.
I totally agree. I really like the way you put that too, about having something to tether outside the bubble. Yeah. I like that.
And that was not a shout out to Tether.
No, of course not. No.
Whatever. It's fine. Whatever. It's $1. Or a fraction of $1. Who knows?
It's the symbolism. It's the symbolism that matters,
Yeah.
But yeah, man, this hour totally flew by, man. Thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
I don't know. Buy Bitcoin, stack sats with Swan. I mean, my thoughts are really that it's as fun as it is to like shoot the shit and talk about this stuff. Like, this is serious, and the reason that I'm in the space is serious. It's like I came into Bitcoin because of what my family went through in the Soviet Union. I hope to God that nobody in America has to experience what actual like authoritarian communism, socialism looks like, with full-on capital controls and all that shit. Lockdowns on people coming in and out of the country, complete media controlled by the state. But we're headed that way, guys. So we need to watch out. And, look, I think America will survive this thing, but we are giving away a lot of liberties right now all over the country. I mean, there's some pretty bad shit going on. I mean, I just read a story about Wisconsin, some county in Wisconsin. They put up a website where you can report your neighbors for gathering more than 10 people. Now, okay, I understand it's a virus and we're trying to protect ourselves and whatever. And I'm all aboard with the staying at home. I'm at home now. I'm quarantined. But holy shit, man, reporting your neighbors. We have California about to launch drones to monitor people on streets. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I know how I feel about it. I think that's fucked. So it's very hard to roll those policies back once they're in place, right? Because I was tweeting about this earlier. We have 18-year-olds now, right? Adults that have never seen a world without the TSA. They all know that to take off their shoes in the airport. They don't question it. It's just like normal life. Do you think the TSA is ever getting rolled back? Do you think the fucking shoe bomber thing is getting rolled back?
Nope.
Never, right? And like nobody even remembers why we do it. We just do it. We just take off our shoes. It's like cultural now.
it's just indoctrination.
It's indoctrination. And that's what I'm most afraid of. So I think Bitcoin is a very important part of this. I think it's one of the only things that exists that protects our freedom in a true way, because we are going to a fully digital society. We're going to work from home more. We're going to use digital money more. Everything is going to be digital, right? When money is digital, then you have no control over how you can spend it. You think cannabis is legal in your state? Go to a cannabis store and use your Visa card. Can you do it? Can you use Apple Pay to buy cannabis? You cannot.
Nope.
Okay, so you have no freedom with your money. The only reason you have freedom is because there's still cash. And that is going to get eradicated very soon.
Yep.
And so, serious shit, guys. After all this back and forth, I don't want to end it on a serious note, but like serious shit. Buy some Bitcoin because it's important. It's important. It's an important way to protect your freedoms. And I'm not even like a hardcore libertarian. I'm just a person with common sense who's come from an authoritarian regime. Okay, buy some Bitcoin and protect yourself and protect your family, protect your children and your grandchildren. Because you know what? Bitcoin might not go to the moon tomorrow. I don't know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But at least it's something that you own. It's yours, and nobody's going to take it from you. So go out and stack on repeat.
Cool. Thank you so much. And obviously, I totally agree. You know, it is serious business.
Yeah.
But you know, it's we're having a little bit of fun with it. You know,
it's fun too. It's fun and it's memes and it's religion. It's all good.
But you're absolutely right. You know, it's especially coming from your background and explaining what you explained. I definitely agree. You know,
I appreciate that.
It totally makes sense, man. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks. This was great. Great
Cool.
talk, and looking forward to listening to this when it comes out.
Cool. Cheers. Thanks again.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope everybody enjoyed my chat with Mr. YanPritzker. His contact details will be in the show notes, as well as mine. So if you want to reach me on Twitter or Telegram, I'm at CoinIcarus. If you'd like to reach me by email, I'm CoinIcarus@funwithbitcoin.com. Catch you all next time.